So, Anthoula,
Hi.
thank you for doing this, and I'm so sorry for this loss.
Thank you.
So, can you tell me about it? Where were you when you heard the news? What was that about?
The morning of September 11th, I actually slept in because I had worked late the night before, and I got a call from my relatives in Greece because obviously the news was unfolding in Greece and they were all on top of it because of the time change. And so they woke me up knowing that I worked for Governor Pataki and assuming that the political system had been disturbed. They didn't know what was happening. They just saw that they know I live in the city. And so they called, they woke me up, and I jumped to my feet, turned on the television as the first tower had been struck, and not really understanding what happened, I guess, as most of the world. And then I got a call from my older brother who told me that my other brother, John Katsimatides, that John worked in at Cantor Fitzgerald at Tower 1. And so he said, please come to Mom's because John works in those buildings.
So, what was your reaction to that? In other words, did you and your family have hope that maybe he didn't go down with the building?
It's a very good question, Mary Jane. As a matter of fact, I was so confident and so sure that my brother was fine because he was a MacGyver of types.
Yes.
He would always get himself into trouble and out of trouble. He was a very, very animated guy, to say the least. So as I walked from my apartment to my mom's home, I remember distinctly the beautiful blue sky. I remember how perfect the weather felt.
Yes.
And I didn't think in a million years what was about to happen. And so when I got to my mom's, I watched the second plane hit the second tower. And I remember falling to my knees and being very upset,
of course,
about those people, my city. What is happening to my city? What is happening in our, beautiful New York City? And I remember thinking about those poor people. And then we began, of course, we were calling John. He left his cell phone at the house. At that time, a cell phone wasn't the accessory that it is today, right? So the necessity, I should say. And so we couldn't reach him. And that began sort of the nightmare that we lived. We did have hope that he would come home. We thought, he's walking over the Brooklyn Bridge. He's going to be. We went to all the hospitals that had triage centers set up. He wasn't there. We posted a picture of his naked, like his top part of his body naked, thinking that perhaps he lost his shirt.
Yes.
And we posted missing posters, which is what a lot of the families had done at that time. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And it wasn't until the 40th, right before the 40th day, so well into October, that our family priest said, maybe we should just read the burial rites, just in case. Because in our religion, they say that on the 40th day is where the soul ascends to heaven. And so you really should pray for the person that may or may not have passed, right? So we did that. And yet, I don't know, we still waited.
So did you ever find any remains? There was no DNA.
There was no DNA, and we did give our DNA swabs to the medical examiner's office. That's an exceptionally incredible place with the most incredible people. 22 years ago, they were so steadfast in their desire to be able to identify people. But unfortunately, 40% of the 9/11 victims were never recovered. 40%. It's a startling number. So 40% of the family members never had anything to bury. So we have a tombstone with a name on it, but there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So it makes it that more difficult to process.
Well, I'm curious about something. Was a lot of your energy at that time, about comforting your mother. Did you get to feel loss?
It took me a while for my own mourning to commence. Obviously, my brother and I were taking care of my mom. My father was in Greece, so planes were grounded. We got him back on the first plane from Greece, and he was, as an immigrant who doesn't speak English, completely confused. And so a lot of our time was spent comforting them.
Yes.
And luckily, we have a tremendous big network of friends and family who came to our aid and supported us. But it was very hard to mourn because we were still in the process of searching, you know, and I went back to work. As I said, I worked for Governor Pataki, and so I immediately wanted to go and help. What can I do? What can I do?
Yes, and what were you able to do through
Well,
the governor?
I was doing community affairs for him before 9/11, but then I ended up fielding all the calls and the requests from 9/11 family members. Yeah, it made sense at the time because I have had the sensitivity of a family member, but also understood the politics of certain situations. And so it was very, very difficult. But I had to do it. So I didn't really have the time to mourn the way I would have wanted until many years later, because then I was appointed to the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, which is the agency that was created to rebuild all of Lower Manhattan. So I was
What did you do there?
I was kind of family liaison to the families, which basically meant that I was their punching bag, their counselor, their friend. I was the go-to between the families and the politicians and the powers that be, and it was the hardest job I've ever had.
Oh, so I'm wondering, since you went through this loss yourself, or were still going through, was that a comfort at all for you?
Interestingly enough, I did find it comforting to know that I could help family members who were grieving and who were in pain, the same kind of pain. It was comforting to know that there was an answer to their question, you know, how to fill out some paperwork, how to get them to the site, you know, just to answer questions that they couldn't get from anybody else because it was pure chaos. I mean, it was chaos, you know, and we had created this wonderful place, we call it the family room. And the family room was created just for 9/11 families so that they could come and grieve. It had couches and it was plastered with wall-to-wall photographs of all the victims that the families would bring in. And I was the caretaker of this room, you know. Smelled like a flower shop, like a field, because there were countless flowers brought in on a daily basis. And it overlooked the site, 20 stories up in the building that we worked. And I found myself sitting in there after work hours sometimes and just memorizing all those beautiful faces, because, you know, the median age was like 37. Everyone was so young and handsome, pretty, and I just felt like I had some time with those spirits, you know.
Yes.
And I actually found that quite comforting too.
Have you been to the memorial that is there, and how do you
Yes,
feel
so
about it?
the segue between working at the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, which in essence was trying to create this memorial, and when they finally had this big international competition and we selected the memorial design that we have now, I was then appointed to the nonprofit board of directors that runs the memorial and the now museum. And that was wonderful because I knew that I could still help maintain something that would pay tribute to my brother John and to the thousands of victims that died that day, but I didn't have to do it from my job. You know, it gave me the ability to then stop working at the LMDC and focus on being a volunteer board member for this wonderful nonprofit. And that's when I took the time to mourn. when I finally wasn't working, and it was 3 years after 9/11, when I wasn't working in that capacity as family liaison anymore, that I got a chance to really sit and think about the loss and how great it was for me and my family. But I also got time, you know, I bought this house, and I found some time to, my kitty cat, to discover who I am and what I want in my life. And
Well, that's what I was going to ask you.
Well, that's when I became
Have
an
you
actor.
changed?
Yeah, oh my God. That's when I became an actress, ironically.
You left the community work and
Government work to become an actor. I didn't know what I was going to do, Mary Jane. And then accidentally, as a favor, I performed in a Greek play in a community theater here locally in Astoria, Queens. And I loved it so much that I just started to say, maybe this is something I can do full time. And then I started taking classes and went to school, learning what it meant to be an actor. Yeah. I just found great happiness on a stage. You know? It was very liberating.
It brought your joy back a little
Absolutely. It also helped to be a different person. You know, in dealing with grief, sometimes you wish that you didn't have the life that you have. And so when you could put on someone else's face, it gave you a little bit of relief. It gave me a lot of relief sometimes, you know, to play someone else.
Sure.
You know.
Has your life changed in outward ways? Like, I believe, do you wear colors and you didn't before? I'm looking at that. I'm just wondering.
That's a great question. So, sadly enough, a year before September 11th, my younger brother passed away. Michael was 25, so I guess I was 26. And in keeping with the Greek culture, we wear black to honor our loved ones for a year. My mom has worn black for 22 years, the last 22 years. So I wore black that year to honor my brother. And my brother John said to me, "What are you doing? You are young and beautiful, and you should be in color, bright colors, reds and pinks." And he was all about, don't mourn the way they do. Mikey wouldn't want that. So then when he died a year and a half later, I couldn't wear black. I knew he wouldn't want that, right? So I started, quote, living in color. And I only wore color. My mom was furious. but I know John would have wanted that. So yeah, it started off as a tribute to John that I was only gonna wear color, but then I felt like, and of course I wear black, you know, New Yorker, right?
Yes.
We wear black.
Yes.
But I do live brighter as well. You know, I feel like I've taken on John's personality. John had a big, loud, boisterous personality, and everyone loved him. And so I feel like I've taken that on now. I feel like I get to live out loud in color, unapologetically. And I don't know if I would have been like that had I not lost John and Michael. But I think that the tragedy, you know, although bittersweet, you know, obviously it taught me to be happier and to kind of realize the limited time that we have, you know, and that could be taken away at any moment. I mean, John just went to work. He just went to work. He didn't go to work on Monday. Why did he go to work on Tuesday? Had he not gone to work on Tuesday, he'd still be here and we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? But, you know, 22 years later, when I say bittersweet, I mean that while I do live happily and out loud, it's not to say that I don't miss him and wish that he were here, you know, to enjoy my happy moments with me, you know?
Yes.
To make fun of this silly little cat. And, you know, maybe for him to get married, and maybe I would have had nieces and nephews. Like, you think about all those things, and
Yes.
you know, it gets to be upsetting, but then you realize, okay, it is what it is.
Yes.
Just continue to breathe.
So, this giving back that you're involved with now, what are you
Yes.
doing now? What is happening for the occasion? How are you?
Oh, well, interesting. For 10 years after the boys died, I started a nonprofit organization myself. It was a family foundation called the Johnny and Mikey Katsimatides Foundation for Life, JAM for Life. And we raised money for several causes that were near and dear to the boys and to disaster victims and crisis victims. And so that subsided 10 years after, right at the same time that we opened the memorial. And so I was on the board of directors for that, and we knew what we were building. We had a design, but I was part of many people who were quite instrumental in making that become a reality. And honestly, I think it's one of my biggest accomplishments to date, because I am so proud of what was created down there. It's just, there was so much dissent about what should be, so much conflict about what should be created on that site.
I remember.
Remember that?
Yes.
It was crazy. And so I think finally everyone has agreed that what is there is really quite beautiful, because it is life affirming. I mean, you have this sound of the running water, you have the canopy of trees, you have, you know, it's open to the sky, you get to reflect. The grass, it's spectacular. And then of course, a year later we opened the museum, and you know, it was probably harder, obviously, to curate the museum. We have some incredible people working on staff that have, you know, we tell the story, we tell the facts of what happened on September 11th, because as you know, we vowed to never forget, right?
Yeah.
And history has a tendency to repeat itself. So we are trying so hard, this institution is trying so hard to make sure that the younger generations continue to be educated about what happened on 9/11, because 22 years later, more than half of the world's population weren't born on 9/11.
It's true.
Before, you know,
Yes.
weren't born in 2001. So it's changing, and we have a real urgent kind of purpose now.
Yes.
It's not just to memorialize our loved ones. It's to really educate the future generations about what happened, you know. It's a huge responsibility. But I encourage everyone to go to the museum. It's, and the memorial. For New Yorkers, it's very hard, Mary Jane, obviously. We ran a whole campaign last year targeting just New Yorkers to get them downtown to the
That's
site.
wise.
Because they are not ready, you know.
No, I don't. I've
People
never
think
been.
22 years, you've never been.
I couldn't do it.
It's just too hard. And I understand that.
But you're really.
You know, but it, I mean, I'll take you, you know, you'll come with me, and you'll understand. You settle down, little kitty cat, and you'll understand that after so much tragedy, we've built something that is so full of, I want to say, life, you know, that we're trying to reaffirm the importance of living your life.
Yes.
And it's nice to meet these people. In the museum, we have a wonderful section that not only has their photographs, but you can call up any one of the victims and hear a loved one speaking about them, talking about them, maybe see a video of them or
Yes.
an image. And it really is, it's a wonderful way to pay your respects.
So you continue to volunteer your time.
Yes, I continue, yeah. And it's quite satisfying. It's very difficult, but I also know that I'm doing it in memory of John. And I feel like it's a wonderful thing to do. But I did want to mention one more thing, that
Tell me.
September 11th, and I know people have said this in various ways and shapes and forms, but they talk about how the tragedy of September 11th was so great. But I like to talk about I've coined it the September 12th effect, because what happened the day after September 11th was mind-blowing. You know, the compassion and the care and the anthropotita, the humanity. that I witnessed firsthand is something that I will never forget. And I will hold on to that because, you know, you really saw the good in people. You know, from the greatest evil, I guess, came the greatest good. It was pretty uplifting and motivating, you know, to see that there is such good in people, you know, that people wanted to help you heal.
We really did pull through as a community.
We really did.
New Yorkers.
It was a community, yeah.
So here's a question.
Yes.
Have you learned something unexpected about yourself through all this?
Oh my gosh, very good question. Yeah, I've learned that I can handle a lot more than I thought I could. I've learned that I am unbelievably strong. And you know, it used to bother me when people said, wow, you're so strong. Oh my gosh, you're dealing with so much. How are you getting through your tragedies? You know, and it used to bother me. I'm not strong because I was crumbling inside. I was dying inside. I was so sad and so depressed. And people kept calling me strong, and it didn't make any sense to me. But then I realized that I did, in fact, survive. And not only survive, but I emerged a better person, a happier person.
It was giving back.
Yeah, who gives back in so many ways. I try so hard. And I try to memorialize him. And it's not just that. It's about understanding that today could be your last day. So why not smile at the guy in front of you online? You know, why not say thank you to the cashier at the supermarket and read her name off of her lapel? Oh my God, I do that all the time, and they love it.
Nice.
You know, simple little things. You know, stop and pet the dog on the street. You know, it just makes for a better existence. So that's
Can
what
you
I
tell
learned.
me John's full name?
John was John Katsimatides, but his middle name was Antonios, as is mine, because we all take our father's names as middle names.